All right, so Cymbal Talk episode 3. I'm here with Bryan, and we are talking about all of this, which will be a lot of fun. Just as a brief intro, I went to Albright with Bryan, and I think we kind of operated in separate musical circles.
Yeah, somewhat.
Sort of met at different times. But I think Friendship Bracelet was the band you were in at that point.
Yeah, it was like a folk band kind of thing I was doing at the time.
Yeah.
Weird vibes. Weird how far we've come from that. Yeah, I think you played at the, your band played at the like arts night thingy that we did at the Tea Factory.
Yeah,
It was like, I remember you had like a bunch of pedals, and I was like, oh man. Like, I didn't know anybody who had pedals at that point. I barely had any myself, and things have changed a little bit from there, but you know.
Right on. Well, how did we get to here, you know?
Oh God. So yeah, like I said, like I was into pedals a little bit when we were in college, but when I got to grad school, that's sort of when I like started going on Reddit, and I found that there was a guitar pedals Reddit, and I was like, oh, this is cool. And I started reading about it and just kind of realized like you can really make your own sort of sonic world with pedals instead of just being like a super duper technically proficient guitar player. Like you can use pedals and other things to make your own sound, and that's always what I've been interested in. So how I got to the current setup from there is like an even longer journey of just, you know, trying to find things that are the most versatile while also the most immediate. And that's sort of like the balance I try to strike is I want stuff that can do as much as I can possibly make it while also being like maybe not simple, but at the very least like something that I feel like I can master and I can really like use and change and manipulate to get my own sounds.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And I mean, a large part of what you did too was the Pedal Friends, was the pedal demo.
Yes.
So how did that come about? Just from that, I guess, that journey from getting into pedals and then to that side.
Yeah, I guess Pedal Friends just sort of what I love pedal demos, and I'm a librarian, and when I'm like at my desk at work, like I have a constant YouTube feed of just like pedal videos and stuff playing in the background, like literally all the time.
That's awesome.
So I just sort of was hearing all these things, and I kind of realized like the band that I used to be in was sort of going into a more dormant period, but I still wanted to make music. And then at the same time, I was kind of looking for new skills to cultivate and work on, and I figured out that if I use Photoshop, which I use to design, you can use that to animate. And I kind of was like, oh, if I teach myself how to animate, then I don't have to worry about how to get like video stuff, because I don't understand video that well. So I can make these pedal demos, I can make these weird sounds, I can show off pedals, maybe get a few from people. And overall, you know, it seemed like a better way and an even more fun way to like connect with other people out there who were using these things instead of just, you know, endlessly hashtagging guitar pedals and ambient notes and all that kind of stuff. It seemed like maybe if I actually contribute and make demos in my own style, that would do something for me. And that's sort of what really got me to where I am today, where I feel like I'm able to pull really crazy things out of really crazy pedals because of all the wonderful builders I've worked with and talked to and all the other people who I've met through demoing and stuff like that.
I mean, I think that's the raddest part about Pedal Friends is that, you know, it's not here's EHX or Boss. I mean, there's some rad stuff that you just don't know is out there that I, personally, I'm sure that others that I learned about it through you, and that's really cool.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I know you're the one who you lent me like the Puzzing from Montreal Assembly, which was like a pedal that I had always heard about, and I'd never played any Montreal Assembly stuff. And then like you lent me that one, and that's like one of my favorite demos I've ever done because it's such a wild pedal, and like it was so cool to be able to take something so crazy and so weird and like make it into some sort of sound that I like and that I can use in a way. And yeah, that's sort of. I don't know if that's sort of become like my sort of signature thing is that I make these weird little songs with these weird, you know, pedal devices and things, but I really have enjoyed sort of finding that niche for myself.
It's awesome. Out of all the pedals that have come through, are there any that are like really standouts for you that you just keep coming back to, or maybe had a permanent spot on the board?
So permanent spot on the board, definitely the Witchfinder Quantum Vision. So this is like it's a small pedal builder in New Jersey. It's sort of just like a multi-effects pedal, very similar to like a BitQuest from Dr. Scientist. And it has become like one of my go-to like composition tools. Like if I'm I can find a sound on that, and then I write the song to the sound. And that's sort of how I approach everything, is like the sound drives the songwriting, not the other way around. So that's been one that, like, once I got it, it went on the board. It hasn't come up from the board. That, and then I would say the Champion Like the Evil Twin. So Champion Like He is Philadelphia-based. Wooly's the best. I love you, Wooly. And this pedal was one that he gave me after I did a different demo for him, and like, it's basically a really gainy boost into a really crazy distortion overdrive thing, but it also does drones, and it's 2 channels, which I always love, like flexibility, like I said. And it's just a pedal that, like, I end up putting it on like a lot of stuff when I'm recording. It's amazing for drums, it's amazing for down-tuned guitars, it's amazing for synths. It just does really great things. I'd say Champion Like is probably like my favorite builder out there right now, and really like doing wild things, and you get the fun art too. So
Yeah, he's doing some awesome stuff.
oh yeah, that Woozy is like a crazy pedal. I beta tested that one, and it's like,
Whew, still need to snag.
oh my god, it's so good. He just put out the one with the blue artwork too, like painted artwork. It's gorgeous. I love it. I need one of those too.
So, kind of going back, my next question was going to be about the writing process, mainly for If, because I think that's probably the one that most people have heard or have access to.
Yeah, exactly.
I guess, where do you start? What's the process like?
God, where do I start? It's tough. So on my past EPs, so I've released 3 EPs as If. The last 2 were like looper based. And that all happened because I got the RC202, which is possibly my favorite like pedal of all time. Because it's just so flexible. It's got the 2 tracks. It has built-in effects that do really crazy things that you can apply to your dry signal and to the looped signal as well, like separately. And I just sort of got this, and then immediately everything sort of started coming together, where I was making these like weird melodies and these weird little sounds that I had never really thought to make before, had the ability to make before. So really what happens most of the time is I just end up having like, I guess, a jam session. I just kind of sit and play and see what ends up happening from the interaction between like guitar pedals and looper, and what I can grab and snip and that kind of thing. For what I'm working on right now, I'm more focused now, instead of doing like strictly guitar looping, I'm actually forcing myself to not play guitar at all. So I have sampled guitar loops and like loops that I've saved onto the RC202, but I'm forcing myself to put the guitar down for like a performance and only use synthesizers and this gear up here.
Okay.
So right now, what happens is, like I said, I just kind of jam, I'm making noises, whatever. I'll grab a loop, and if I like that loop, then I build everything else around it, and I put the guitar down. And it's been really freeing and really interesting. It's really hard. It's really complicated. And it's probably a really slow way to work. I've been working on some of these songs for like 3 months now, and I used to be the person for the loop DPs. I did them both in a week. Like, I went from nothing to everything in a week, and like it was all improvised, pretty much. And this stuff is very different, and it's much, like I said, much more challenging, and I appreciate that. And it's nice to sort of say, okay, after I get the initial guitar loop, now what do you do? How do you play these other instruments to make the sounds that you want and build the songs? I don't know if they're good. I think they're good. I like them so far. They're pretty interesting. So yeah, it's sort of a strange process, but it's very much, like I said, driven by the gear. It's what sound do I get when I put this, and this on, and then what can I build around that sound?
Would you say that's more of a melody-based approach when you approach the pedals, or it's more? I guess it depends on the pedal, right? If you're playing through something like a slicer, you're going to get a really rhythmic aspect to what you're doing, and then if you're playing, through a pitch shifter or what have you, might be more melody-based. Is that kind of how you go about it, or? That's
a good question. I kind of wonder. I think a lot of the time, I feel like I'm like a melody-based person, and like a lot of the time, even with like my older bands and stuff, we weren't so big on. We tried not to be big on typical song structure. We really rather, like, there were songs that we would have that were like 10 different parts that just happened in a row, like more in like a post-rock kind of style. So a lot of the time what ends up happening for my music now is I latch on to like one melody, and I have that looping, and then it's just building around that melody, taking it in, taking it out, using mutes and using the looper to sort of manipulate that loop to make a new sound or to just sort of shift that sound somewhere else. So I would say a lot of the time it's melody based, but there is a lot of stuff that I do that's sort of like, I have a drone, you know, that's just sort of nothing, and then I have to add other things to it, you know, so maybe the melody isn't written, it's just a random drone, be it from a keyboard or be it from like guitar. I have it all routed into this DMD 2000 back here that I got from you actually. And that's been really cool too for like the drone aspect of things, because it has like crazy feedback that doesn't get overwhelming, and you can hold stuff and that kind of thing. So I can get kind of glitchy with that and really ambient with that on top of everything, and then build the song out from there, be it on the circuit primarily or on like the monologue.
It's awesome, man. It's a really cool setup too, and just really neat approach to it.
Thanks. Yeah, it's been really crazy, and like getting Zoya has been really mind expanding and wild, just because it does almost too many things, but it's so approachable to me at least, and like I feel like the interface is laid out so well that I really can go from, you know, basic sound to something super duper crazy just by following my ideas. I don't go into Zoya thinking I want to design this. I go into Zoya saying, all right, let me lay this down. Oh, let me do this to this. Oh, what happens here? Oh, boom, there's a sound. And it just kind of works. I've had it for like a month, and it's been a really fun just experiment overall.
Kind of answered my next question too, man. I mean, I was curious, and you answered this ultimately, but you know, if you had like a sound in your head, like, oh, I wonder what would happen if, you know, this thing did this, or if it's kind of like, oh, how do I create this? But
yeah, I guess I don't know. It's interesting. Yeah, I don't know that I'm not the type of person to get like sounds in my head. Like I don't write melodies in my head. I'm not good at translating like a melody I think of to the keys or to guitar. So it really is just sort of stuff happens. Like, let me plug this into this, let me put this, you know, let me link this module to this module, and boom, now that's happening. Oh, what can I do with that? So I think it's more in that style where it's really there driving it, and it's not me knowing that this is going to happen. I think ultimately what ends up happening is you do get that flip though, where once I do that thing, now I know, oh, there's a trick I can use. Like there's something I can do, you know, and like that's with like the RC202, like I feel like I'm constantly learning new things, because there's a million effects in here that you can just like shift through in a million different ways and assign in different functions and different places. And so, you know, if I'm kind of feeling lost or feeling like I'm not inspired right now, you know, I hit this first almost, where it's like, oh, what's this one? Oh, cool, it does that. Okay, let me write a little thing. And that's sort of where like, weirdly, like Instagram helps a lot too, because I feel like it's an exercise in putting out a sketch. It's saying, oh, here's a random idea I had. Here's a thing I drew up really fast. I might employ this later, but ultimately I know I can do this now. If that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. That's awesome, man.
Thanks.
So, you go through a lot of gear.
Oh, yeah.
Some of us do.
I do.
Does there ever come a point in that writing process where it's like, I wish I really had this to achieve this? Or is it just kind of like, you know, things come and go and just work with what you have present at the time?
I think a little bit of both again,
Okay.
But I think ultimately I am the type of person where once I get something, I do my best to quote unquote master it. Now, there are things that are like unmasterable. Like, I'm never going to be like the perfect person for Zoya. I'm never going to be able to pull everything out that it can do. There are people on the internet that are, and I don't understand them, and that's great. And I'm happy that they're there because they're making cool patches. But, you know, something like, I feel like all gear, like if you push it far enough, you're going to find what you want. And if you don't find what you want, you're going to find something better or something interesting. That being said, you know, there are limitations as well. You know, like right now I'm in the process, I love the Novation circuit, it's super cool, it's been really great as like my intro to being like, I really want synthesis to be something I focus on, but now I'm at the point where I'm gonna replace this, and I actually just ordered an Electron model samples this morning, because I'm just writing music that this can't handle the right way. It can do it, and so that's kind of nice, because it's like, oh, I found how to make this work, but I think I found something that can do it better.
Gotcha.
And so with that, like, I sold a bunch of stuff, and then I realized, oh, I want something different for down here, so I sold a bunch of stuff and bought the monologue. And then sometimes stuff just comes to me, whether it be through pedal friends, like I'll get new pedals that I can employ. And like, even though these aren't on the board, they're still used.
Yeah.
Especially since I have that capability to basically sample things. I'll use different things to make different sounds. So I think a lot of the time, I do have my eye on a specific piece of gear, and I'm kind of like, oh, this would fill niche A, B, and C. But I'm also very open to like, oh, here this thing happens to be, let me try this. Or someone is lending me blank pedal, let me put it here and see what happens.
Gotcha.
So a little bit of both, like I said, but I am definitely the type where like, I'm always thinking, what's the next piece that I'm going to get? Like, what's the next thing that's going to change the world for me? And then I get it, and it's like, oh, this is pretty neat. But everything can be world changing, I think, in a way.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
With the new stuff that you're writing on this gear, is there anything, I guess, sonically or anywhere it's going at this point, or I guess are you far enough in the process to kind of answer that?
Yeah, I think so. So overall, so like I know a lot of my like Instagram content and a lot of the Pedal Friends videos are like these sort of, and even the If material previous has been very like upbeat and very happy and very like peppy, and like I get a lot of influence from like cartoons like Adventure Time and stuff like that. I have an Adventure Time tattoo. And so for this one, it's not that I'm trying to not do that, but more what I'm focusing on is I want to make like more laid back sounds and more ambient kind of stuff, and sort of embrace the idea that I have to work differently, and that's why I'm cutting out live guitar playing entirely. So a lot of it has been fairly different from what I've done in the past, but not in a bad way. So I'm using, on circuit, you do have the ability to have all of these different sounds. And so what I'm actually doing is, since the drums are just sample playback, I'm using a lot of sampled sounds on here. So I have, let me wait for that. So I've got a lot of like sampled pianos. And these aren't my samples, these are ones I find for free on the internet and that kind of thing. Whether it's like a detuned piano or whether it's just a single note. And then I'm programming it to play those notes and things at the right whatever and on the right time, adding distortion and that kind of thing. So there's a lot of that like really kind of like lo-fi broken sounding samples mixed with the rest of the gear. So there's a lot of, I'm using guitar samples, I have this Casio tone down here, I'm using samples of the Casio tone and like loops that I've made into other pedals and into other things. And overall, it's a lot like slower. It's music that kind of makes me just like go like this in a way. And it's, like I said, I'm trying to just capture a different vibe from what I've done in the past.
Gotcha.
While still sort of retaining that link of, it does still sound like me, I think. There's a lot of pitch shifting. There's a lot of pitch shifting guitar, which is like my thing. But it's sort of, I don't know, it just has a different feel, a different kind of vibe.
Gotcha. Just gonna check cameras one real
Sounds
quick,
cool.
and then I have one more question for you here.
Sounds good.
Cool. So I wanted to talk about Zoya a bit because it's just kind of this thing, you know. And like I remember seeing it like, you know, on Talk Bass or whatever like 2 years ago, and then it just never came to be. And then April Fools of this year, it's like, surprise, here's this pedal.
Yeah.
And I think just the concept of it is just awesome.
Oh yeah.
But there's definitely a lot to it. What, I guess, in this writing setup, how do you utilize it?
So Zoya is not my most recent addition to this setup, that'd be the monologue, but Zoya is sort of the thing that is allowing me to feel comfortable not playing guitar, because it can fill so many different areas. So like, I'm using a lot of patches where things are happening on the Zoya that are not synced to anything else. So I'm using like a lot of LFOs to manipulate, like this patch I'm looking at right now, I know, is manipulating a gain level on an overdrive. So when I'm playing something into it, it's just going, and it's like swelling and going back on the gain. Now that's not synced to circuit or the looper or anything else, so it's just kind of randomly happening. So because of the nature of the Zoya, what I'm able to do is I'm able to have these super duper expressive sounds that I'm making that are automated. So all I gotta do is hit this, play a note, and it's doing the thing. and I can loop it, and it can sound really interesting. And to me, it adds a lot of life to things. There's other patches that I have as well where it's playing the part of a synthesizer, where I can play it like a keyboard, and it's just another sound that I can add to my overall mix. And then there's also, like this patch specifically, there's a keyboard, there's a sequencer that I can trigger with the foot switch, and then there's also effects just for the incoming signal. So like, it's playing all of the parts at once, and it's super duper wild, and you know, it's really overly complicated probably, but again, it's getting me to a place where I'm making a sound that I could not make elsewhere.
Right.
And it's somewhat automated, or at the very least, it's just totally unique to Zoya. So it sort of plays the part of simultaneously making me feel comfortable enough to experiment with the setup and to really try things where it's just, all right, well, something's going to happen. Something's going to come out, and it's going to sound a certain type of way. I know I can play in key, so hopefully this will make it sound even better. And it's also, again, sort of becoming a base for me to write other things with. You know, there are some loops that I'm starting to work on now that are things that are coming out of Zoya that I looped randomly, or I made a sequence that I looped and then I'm writing things around it. So I think that answers the question.
Yeah, definitely.
It's an infinitely deep pedal, which is what everybody who has one will tell you. But that depth really is what makes it so unique and so wild. I've never had the experience that I have building things on this pedal with anything else. And I have highly editable pedals. Like, I'm a big multi-stomp person. That's like what I'm known for, I think, on YouTube at this point.
Yeah.
You know, and like DD500 is also like an endless well of inspiration. LA Lady from Source Audio is much better than anyone gives it credit for. But Zoya, I can do anything, you know. And then not only can I do anything, but then I can make it do other things to my anything. And it's just, it's so crazy. It's so expressive and so deep and so endlessly fun. There's such a wide user base for it already. Like, most of the patches I have on here actually aren't mine. They're stuff that other people built that I'm just sort of, you know, if I'm jamming out and I'm just working on one of these songs, the way that I end up writing the song is I just kind of spin this around, I hit a patch, turn it on, play a note, and see if that fits, and then immediately write it down. And see what happens. I can hear the crazy things are happening through my headphones. Yeah.
That's awesome, man. Well, I can't wait to hear what you do with this setup. It's
cool.
It's awesome. It sounds awesome. So very excited for that. Do you have a time frame at this point, or just kind of just the beginning stages of this thing?
I'm sort of I feel like I'm in the middle of the process where I'm sort of between like feeling like the songs are ready to be recorded and just putting together the final pieces for them. So, like I said, I mean, the last 3 EPs I've put out, all of those were recorded in a week. Like, I took a week of vacation and just sat down and did it. Whatever came out is what came out, and I was happy with it. These ones have been really like cooking for a long time, a longer time. And I'm hoping that now what I can do is, since I have sort of a structure and I know what I want them to sound like, now I'm hoping I could tap into that same sort of like, you have a week, just do it energy, where they are planned, there is structure, but there is a lot of like random stuff that can happen, and I can sort of improvise over stuff and just make things happen, so long as it's just with what's here.
Oh, that's great, man. Bryan, thank you so much for taking the time to do this, man.
Yeah.
It's always a blast talking about gear, and you're one of the best at it, so.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Cool. Yeah, do you want to hear some stuff then?
Yeah.
All right, let's get into it. Okay. So, like, normally what I would do to start is I just make sure that, like, everything is synced up the right way. So, like, I'll typically just lay down just 4 on the floor. And, like, check my tempos. It's kind of a bit fast. I'm writing a lot slower stuff now, so I'm playing super slow. Go 100 BPM. So, circuit is keeping everything in time. So it's keeping RC202 in time, so I can always loop exactly in time. It's keeping the DD500 in time as well. Now, DD500 displays in milliseconds, which I can also use on the DMD2000 to do that basic like conversion. There's a lot more math than I ever thought there would be in my music. And this might make a lot of noise when I do this. But. So I'm going to set this to 1,000. Okay. This is annoying sounding. Okay. Oh, I messed up. Let me fix that. Okay. Let's actually not do. There we go. That's a better count in for me. So let's say I wanted to run with that. So now I know I've got my loop guitar part, which is super duper weird, but it's still potentially something I could work with. So I know that that is in the key of A sharp. So that would be my bass tone. So this is obviously lacking bass, so. Basics of something there. Now, ultimately, if I don't like what I did, so much more emphasized. I still have this bass line, which I can use for something. Okay, so let me take out some stuff. So let's take out the DMD. This is now where I can add in drums. So that's Zoya expanded. So that's sort of that like random element. Where this is just an LFO that's expanding a gain channel, right? And you can still hear it happening in the back. So it's super duper crazy. Now the other thing is, it also has a delay that's jumping time as well. That's totally random. So you can sort of hear it speeding up and slowing down a little bit in there. It's super duper loud, super crazy, but it's a nice sound. And this sort of stuff is what I really like from it. Is those leftover trails. And a lot of time, what I'll do is I'll record just those trails as a drone. for a song. So if I want to take out, again, let's take out the guitar part. Let's say... Now I have like that weird drone. My whole process then ends up being driven by, again, the gear did this, how do I make it into a song? So if I want to play that... And so,
That's rad.
Yeah, so like I have, and again, this is all just like super lo-fi pitchy stuff, but that can end up fitting into this somewhere, and what I can do is, the other thing that I really like about this setup and about like the looping nature of things and like using the samples is I can use like really non-traditional guitar tones that might not fit elsewhere, so like I can turn the bass all the way down and the treble all the way up, and sort of have like... and sort of have these tones that like I would never use anywhere else necessarily, but it might sound good. And that would probably fit into this mix, even though it's really a little bit. Kind of how it ends up working, where it's mostly just a lot of different sounds that I'm just taking in, pulling out, and manipulating, flipping, realizing again, like, oh, I want just the trails from this, so let me keep just the trails from this and sample just that. And like, that's what the whole basis of that sound is. And so I started out with a melody and I didn't like it, but I ended up getting to one that I did, even though that guitar sound is like not something I would ever normally want to use. It sounds good in this mix and it fits. So yeah, I hope that kind of makes sense in any way, shape, or form, and sort of explains how I'm not playing things to play things in a way. Like, I'm letting the gear sort of drive exactly what's happening, and I'm letting the loops sort of speak for themselves instead of worrying about, like, oh, what's the next melody part going to be? It's just, these are the, like, 4 different parts I have. I'm going to mute and jump between them, and that's going to end up making the song. So, yeah, I hope that kind of makes sense and sort of explains what I was talking about earlier.
Definitely does. It was great, man.
Thanks.
Really cool.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't hate that guitar sound whatsoever, actually. So I'm actually, now I know that I have that, I'm going to use that. And again, that's another one of those points of like, I didn't know that I had that sound in my arsenal. Now I do. So when am I going to use it? When am I going to pull it out and put it into a song? So, yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for showing us, man.
Yeah, of course. Thanks.